Hi, my name is Doherty and I'm second horn in the Philharmonia Orchestra. I've come to the Royal Academy of Music today to meet up with my old teacher Richard Watkins, who used to be principal horn in the orchestra for 10 years. He's playing two pieces in a horn-themed concert that we're performing on the 16th of January. So I've come to speak to him today to find out a bit more about the legacy of horn playing in the Philharmonia. I've also been told that he has a surprise for us, so let's go in and meet him.
Hi Kira, it's really nice to see you again and welcome back to the Royal Academy. When was the last time you were here? Was it only a few years ago, I'm sure?
Yes, well it does feel like a long time when I first came here in 2004 as a student, as a postgrad student, and I remember meeting you for the first time, so that does feel like a lifetime ago. And I can't believe now that I'm actually in the orchestra that you were principal in for a decade, I believe, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah, 1985 to 1995 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you end up in the Philharmonia?
I came to the Royal Academy and I'd already met Michael Thompson, principal horn at the time. He used to live very close to me. I used to go to Philharmonia concerts on a regular basis. That was with Riccardo Muti. There always seemed to be real events and real occasion. And the orchestra was absolutely on incredible form, as it still is now. So I took a job with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra briefly, but then there was a third horn vacancy. So I came down to that in 1983. It was clear that Michael was actually having a very busy solo career. So I was fortunate enough to step up and play a little bit of first horn. But I remember that particular time when I was the official third horn as being incredibly formative, an incredibly learning experience for me to listen to a really great player. And I remember thinking when he did leave in 1985, they were very big shoes to follow. I wanted to ask you whether you're aware to this day of a particular Philharmonia horn sound. I mean, and also whether that is reflected in the orchestral sound as well. I mean, sometimes people think of it as a bit of a myth.
I do think that there's a certain tradition of sound, and that is absolutely why I came to London, and why the Philharmonia has had such an important place for me as a horn player, is because of that sound.
Yes.
It's been such a pleasure actually to be part of the orchestra that Denis Brain was part of. And I think that was one really major reason I wanted to come here. You know, London's got the lion's share of spectacular horn players.
I mean, he was actually the very first principal horn of the Philharmonia. Yeah. I mean, the orchestra was founded in 1945 by the EMI record producer, Walter Legg. Yeah. And he recruited all the finest players from the wartime services, Denis Brain being one of them. I mean, he was already a pretty much a household name as a horn player. The Britten Serenade, which is one of the pieces we're playing in the concert in January, that was written for Brain. He actually collaborated with Britten initially on a horn concerto, and then the Serenade came along as a result of that. I suppose it goes back to that German romantic tradition. You know, when the orchestra first started, it was associated with conductors Furtwängler, Toscanini, Richard Strauss, and Karajan, of course, who was in all but name the principal conductor. Whenever I hear the orchestra play Brahms symphonies, it just seems to sound just so right. It's a strange thing. It
doesn't matter kind of if it was then or now that there was that tradition. It was almost like a flexibility and a legato kind of smoothness, and a reaction to the music going on that was always kind of preserved in the horn section and the orchestra as a whole. It's interesting, sorry, just to come back to Denis Brain and the Britten Serenade. So we have this tradition back then. I mean, obviously as a horn player we have the Mozart concertos, Strauss concertos, and other pieces as well, but we don't have the same kind of range of repertoire that perhaps a violin would have. So already with Denis Brain, you started seeing this tradition of commissioning because of the player kind of inspiring the creation of new work.
His father, Aubrey Brain, was a really renowned horn player, and there's a famous recording of the Brahms trio with Busch and Serkin. But as you say, the horn wasn't really a respected instrument until Denis Brain came along. And his recording of the Mozart concertos was the all-time #1 top seller. My parents, I remember they told me when he died, tragically was killed in the car crash in 1957, it actually made headline news. That he really was like a pop star, superstar name, you know.
As a brass player, you know, to attain those heights in a way.
Yes.
I remember my mother, I was looking through the vinyl at home, as you do when you're a child, and kind of thought, what's this? And of course it was Denis Brain's Mozart horn concertos. Way before I even dreamt of picking up the horn. That recording really featured in a lot of people's, you know, vinyl collections, for sure.
Yes. He commissioned the Hindemith Concerto, Gordon Jacob, the Tippett Quartet, Hindemith Sonata for 4 horns as well. So all sorts of wealth of repertoire for us. Although, I mean, great though it is, there's no escaping the fact that the best repertoire for the horn has been and always will be in the orchestra. So which is rather nice. I mean, although it's the concert we're doing in January is a nice juxtaposition of some great horn orchestral repertoire. There's the Freischütz Overture and Till Eulenspiegel, one of the all-time favourites, alongside the Britten Serenade and the new piece. So it's a nice sort of mixture, I think.
So neither of us get off lightly in that concert.
No. I'll be enjoying listening to you playing in Till Eulenspiegel.
So I have been told by a little bird that you might have a surprise for us today.
Yes. So we've been talking a little bit about the tradition of the horn playing in the Philharmonia, and we were talking about Denis Brain in particular, and the instruments and the sound and everything. I wondered if you were aware of, I think you mentioned he had a very kind of light, lyrical quality to his sound. I wondered whether do you think that had any bearing on the instrument he would have played?
I think so. I mean, I actually spent a certain amount of time in my apprenticeship of playing the horn, working at Paxman's here in London, but actually watching the process of making horns and what goes into them. And so, of course, the way that a horn will be built will affect the sound coming out of it.
Yeah. I gather that it was actually made to his own specification. And I do have a little surprise because I do actually happen to have it right here. So this is actually Denis Brain's horn. And it was actually very badly damaged in the tragic crash that killed him. But it's been lovingly restored by Paxman's. And you'll probably see that the bell is rather high up. Because his previous horn was the piston Rau horn, which had the bell almost sort of a little bit higher up. So he actually had this made just to his own specification, which is why it looks rather strange. So he would actually play it like
yes,
that.
of course, and you
Whereas
can see the pictures.
the normal horn players have the bell kind of towards their leg, you know.
So this is actually reflects the fact that he was doing more solo work as well. That you.
I guess so. Yes. The reason he commissioned this horn to be built was a lot of players felt that his horn was a little bit lightweight sometimes, particularly in an orchestral sense. It was great for playing chamber music and solo, but I'm not quite sure whether there's how much truth there is in that, because I think any great player, I mean, they make their own sound.
That's
true. You listen to Michael, Thompson, Nigel, and Denis Brain. They all have their own individuality in their sound. But there's
that's astonishing. I mean, I've never actually. Oh God, it is quite funny, isn't it? It does feel a bit lighter than the
It
modern
is, yes.
horns, actually.
Yes.
And of course, this is a
It's
single.
just a single B flat horn, yes.
Because generally we play on doubles. I mean,
Yes.
especially being a low horn player, I'd
Exactly,
play
of
on
course,
a full
of course.
double.
As would Denis Brain's colleagues in the Philharmonia in the 50s.
Absolutely.
Play on double horns.
So this is quite a treat to be able to have this out
Yeah.
of the high security glass cabinet downstairs.
Yes, we're very fortunate and grateful to the Academy for allowing us to.
Sometimes, yes, depending on people's hands, they might even, and how much they play it, they can even kind of wear through the metal.
Yes,
so
yes.
we've got a patch in there.
I have several of those.
Yes, exactly. I wonder how it plays. Have you ever played this?
I've played a little bit. Would you like to try a little bit? See what you think.
Okay. Why not? Well, only if you do as well.
Okay, we'll both have a go.
Okay. Right.
And have you noticed that the metal is actually very thin?
Yes.
I mean, sometimes that has a possible bearing on the quality of the sound. I mean, Denis Brain's sound had that beautiful purity to it, didn't it?
Yes.
A really lyrical, ringing sound.
So this would have been built in what year?
This was built in the 1951, I think.
1951.
It's an Alexander single horn.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Restored by Paxman's.
Restored by Paxman's, yeah.
Despite being absolutely wrecked in a car crash,
Yeah.
that's a lovely instrument.
It is, isn't it?
It really is. I
Yeah.
was not expecting that.
Yeah.
Do you want to have a go?
I always feel rather humble when I hold this instrument.
Yeah.
As you say, I mean, it's very badly damaged, but the quality of the sound is, it does feel like a super instrument, doesn't it?
It really does.
I was trying to work out how he would have played the Britten Serenade as there's no F horn, because of course the prologue is written for natural harmonics, but I guess he probably could have used the first and third, which
put 1 and 3 down.
puts the so of course those harmonics are supposed to be out of tune.
Right, I see.
So it's always a good idea to kind of make sure the program note says that.
Is to be played on open
Yeah,
harmonics,
yeah.
which are naturally go against the tempered scale.
And actually Britten had to correct a lot of reviews when the piece was first performed and first recorded. He came to the defense of Denis Brain, who was accused of being out of tune. And I think in one of his letters he said, "I wish I'd never written the harmonic thing at the beginning of the prologue.
Really?
It's just caused me more grief than it's worth." So too young to work with Britten. But I was fortunate enough to work with Peter Pears, not when he was singing, but he was doing a little bit of conducting. So we did a performance of the Serenade. And I asked him about the prologue, and he just told me to imagine I was just standing alone on the surface of the moon, which is quite a nice way of thinking about it. So
Yes.
it gives that eeriness and that sort of mystical feeling to the piece.
Yes. And that would have been played on this one or the horn before, the Rao, the piston horn?
It was probably played on the Rao piston horn, that being in the first performed in 1943. So that was before this horn was...
First performed in 1943?
Yeah, so it's been around.
In the middle of the war?
The wartime concert, yeah.
God, that must have been quite affecting. So the Wigmore concert in 1943 in London.
In London.
With
There was a
bombs
huge
falling.
amount of concert going on. I mean, there was the Mara Hess series at the National Gallery, I think, of which Denis Brain was one of the featured. He was the horn player, the go-to horn player to play all the Mozart and Brahms trios. I think he played. So yeah, he was very much a household name. From the Edinburgh Festival.
From the Edinburgh Festival, which still goes on, the Philharmonia still plays at. And to try and get to a recording session the next morning, was that correct?
I believe so, yes, yes. That was the part of the legacy of the original Philharmonia. In a way, it was a more freelance band of players. I mean, the very best freelance players. So they were combining working with von Karajan, Toscanini, but also doing occasional film sessions, which I think the main studio was at Denham. And there's a lovely story. I think Karajan disapproved of his orchestra in between classical recordings, going up to record film music. So he kept on trying to change the times of his recording sessions so that they wouldn't be able to make it up to Denham and back. But of course, the film studios were quite a canny bunch, and they just rearranged their sessions to fit around Karajan's schedule. Yes. So they were all going up to Denham.
Yes, and of course, and that tradition sort of continues to this day with the film sessions, because that's quite those sessions are quite movable. And I mean, you do a huge amount of recording work.
I do some commercial work, yes. So it's fun. I think a lot of the American film companies, the composers, particularly the horn sound is very much one of the factors that they come over to London to record. Of course, the horn sound in Los Angeles is really, really, really good too, but it's a very much darker sound, and they actually sometimes some composers prefer the sort of the slightly more brassy edge to the sort of perhaps slightly more kind of thrilling sound that you get in London sometimes.
Why were you kind of drawn to the horn when you picked it?
It was the sound, actually. I mean, I remember at school, I was at a very small school where there was hardly any music, but very, very forward-looking music teacher. And she invited someone, he was a very talented chap who came along with all the instruments of the orchestra, lined them all up. And must have been an incredible guy, because he could actually dabble on a little bit of every instrument. So then he asked everyone in the class if they'd like to have a go on any particular instruments. And the whole class wanted to only try out the French horn. So I guess he must have done the French horn the best. That must be. I should explain, I was aged about 7.5 at the time. And I watched all my schoolmates sort of try and go, nothing. So being W, I worked out that there was something different that you had to do. So I actually managed to get out a noise. So I was the youngest in the class, and I was suddenly hero very briefly for the rest of the day. And everyone did actually want to pick me in the soccer team, you know, very briefly, until they realized how bad I was. But anyway, then I went home and asked my parents that I said I wanted to play the French horn. And my father was a great LP collector, and he had the Denis Brain recording, so he just very surreptitiously put the recording on, and apparently I just said, that's what I want to play. So I went, that's how I started, really. Then we went, my parents didn't really know about Paxman's at the time, so they went to Boozy and Hawkes. That was the only kind of music sort of retail store they'd heard of, and Boozy and Hawkes had stopped making horns a long time before. But they realized that they had lots of little bits left over from repairs and things, so they literally cobbled a horn together and then presented it to my parents, and that's how I started, really.
It kind of captures the imagination, and when you do speak to conductors and composers, it's quite interesting how many of them actually do say the horn is their favorite instrument, and I think it's because of that sound.
Yes.
That's
I like Schumann's comment. He described the horn as being the soul of the orchestra.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
Yes, I wonder what he said about the other instruments. So, I mean, at the moment you teach here at the Academy, do you see enough students coming through playing the horn? I mean, is it becoming an endangered
a little bit, yes. I mean, the cutbacks are enormous now. So whereas we will be auditioning for 2 or 3 days of horn players, it's much less now. It's just down to sort of one or 1.5 days of auditions. And sadly, most of the horn students tend to come from the specialist music schools or even the private schools. So that state funding is or cutbacks are really biting hard, which is a shame.
Yes.
But hopefully this concert will galvanise young horn players to hear the kind of great variety that the horn is capable of as a solo instrument and an orchestral instrument.
I mean, the parts that the horn gets are some of the...
They're unbeatable, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah, they're great fun to play, yes. I secretly sometimes go at home, I play along to CDs, play along pretend I'm in the horn section. So, and I quite enjoy working with my students when they invariably come to lessons with orchestral excerpts. It's great fun to go back and remind myself of those great moments.
I hope you've enjoyed today our talk with Richard Watkins, and I also do very much hope that you can all come along to the concert on the 16th of January, featuring Richard as a soloist and the Philharmonia in a varied repertoire. First of all, the Britten Serenade, the Turnage New Commission of a Horn Concerto, Freischütz Overture, and Till Eulenspiegel. Thanks very much.